Silence gripped the Kingsley, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, so thick it felt touchable. The clinking of silverware came to a halt. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward the small space between two rows of tables. Lucas Montgomery, 10 years old, was trembling. His legs, braced in metal supports, shook with a rhythm that seemed to betray his own body. But his hand didn't reach for his father, not for a nurse either. He reached for Diana Johnson, the only black waitress in the entire restaurant. The first gentle notes of piano music drifted through the air. And in that one motion, unexpected, unannounced, Lucas shattered everything this place was built upon: order, distance, and control. "Sir, control your son." Manager Thornton's voice sliced through the room like a blade. "This isn't a dance floor, and our staff are not here to entertain children." Richard Montgomery, Lucas's father, owner of Montgomery Investments, and one of the wealthiest men in America, swallowed hard. It was the first time he'd taken Lucas out to dinner since the accident 2 years ago, and it might very well be the last. "Lucas, sit down." His voice was low, firm, commanding. The order was given, but that small hand remained suspended in midair, and Diana had yet to answer. Lucas Montgomery hadn't led anything, not once, since the day his world collapsed. 2 years ago, an accident stole the freedom from his legs, and along with it, the ever-present smile that used to light up the entire living room. Since then, he'd lived in a world of doctors, physical therapists, and sympathetic nods. No one expected him to lead. They guided, they lifted, they limited. Diana Johnson was no stranger to invisibility. In her 5 years serving at the Kingsley, she'd mastered the art of moving without sound, smiling just enough, and avoiding the gaze of men like Richard Montgomery. She had never been asked to dance, and certainly no one had ever stood up for her. And Richard was a man built on control. He'd forged a financial empire out of cold numbers and unforgiving decisions. But now, standing before his son's trembling hand, he felt like a stranger in his own life, since Elizabeth, his wife, passed away. He had constructed a recovery system for Lucas, comprehensive, state-of-the-art, flawless on paper. The only problem? He never asked his son if that was the way he wanted to be healed. 3 people, 3 separate worlds, and now, one single moment, was slowly pulling them together. Diana didn't say a word. She quietly untied her worn apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on her tray, as if performing a sacred ritual. "My shift is over," she said, her voice calm. Then, to the stunned silence of the entire room, she turned to Lucas and smiled. "You invited me to dance," she said, light as a breeze. "I can't dance while wearing an apron." She didn't wait for permission. She didn't seek anyone's approval. Diana reached out, and Lucas took her hand. A soft scrape echoed through the room as the boy dragged his left foot forward. The metal brace on his leg scraped the polished tile, sharp as a blade against the ears. Someone shivered. A woman whispered, "She's definitely getting fired." But Diana didn't flinch. She didn't lift him. She didn't lead. She simply walked, matching Lucas's pace, step for step, no more, no less. Each movement he made was a struggle. But in his eyes, something was shifting, from fear to focus, from shame to pride. Beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by tuxedos and gowns, a boy was learning how to lead again, and a woman, for the first time, chose not to bow her head. Mr. Thornton, the restaurant manager, stepped forward, his expression cold as steel. "Mr. Montgomery," he said, voice straining to remain composed, "I assure you this will not happen again. She will be dealt with accordingly." A wave of murmurs rippled across nearby tables. A man shook his head. A woman discreetly pulled out her phone, recording the moment like she was witnessing a slow-moving societal accident. But Richard didn't hear any of it. Not right now. Because in his mind, a memory surged, so vivid it momentarily drowned out the room. Elizabeth, his wife, dancing with Lucas in the living room. Lucas was only 5, clumsy, stepping all over her shoes. She laughed. "It's not about perfection," she whispered, as Richard watched from a distance. "It's about connection." His gaze dropped to Lucas's feet, each slow step wobbly but self-driven. No one was holding him up. No one was pushing him forward. The boy was leading, and the woman beside him was simply following. A small thing, seemingly insignificant in the world of wealth and power, but for the first time in 2 years, Richard felt something stir inside his chest. 3 steps, just 3 unsteady steps, metal scraping against the marble floor. Then, Diana gently bowed her head, placed her hand and led Lucas back to the table, and bowed, like a lady on a ballroom floor. "Thank you for the dance," she said, her voice low and dignified, as if speaking to a gentleman, not a child. "It was my honor." Lucas blushed, but smiled, and Richard stood frozen. No one in the restaurant dared to speak. Silverware remained still. An air of tension stretched tight across the elegant room, like a string pulled to its breaking point. "Wait," Richard said suddenly. His voice sounded strange, even to him. "What's your name?" Diana turned back, calm and composed. "Diana Johnson, sir." Richard nodded, repeating the name as if etching it somewhere that paper couldn't hold. Diana Johnson. He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, held it out. "My office, 10 a.m. tomorrow." A soft gasp escaped from the next table. A server dropped a glass. No one picked it up. Diana took the card with her right hand. Her left remained clenched. For just a moment, it trembled, but her face didn't change. The lobby of Montgomery Tower gleamed, sunlight bouncing off glass and marble walls. Diana stepped inside, wearing her best, a navy blue dress and a simple white blouse. It was the finest outfit she owned, bought during an end-of-season clearance. People passing her wore clothes worth more than her monthly rent. But she didn't flinch. "Diana Johnson to see Mr. Montgomery," she said clearly at the reception desk. The elevator carried her to the 18th floor, where every surface was polished to a shine, as if trying to reflect back a version of her that didn't belong. "He's in a meeting," said a woman named Winters, as she led Diana down the corridor, eyes scanning her from head to toe. "He called you in to fire you, didn't he?" "No," Diana replied softly. "He invited me." "Someone like you?" Diana smiled, not from amusement, but from familiarity. She'd heard it all before. Inside the office, Richard stood with his back to the door. Manhattan sprawled silently behind him, like a toy city resting beneath his feet. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing toward the chair in front of his desk. Silence settled between them. "Do you have a degree?" he asked at last. "Bachelor's in Child Development from New York University. Master's in Special Education. Incomplete." Richard frowned. "And you work as a waitress?" "3 jobs," Diana replied. "The restaurant, a weekend shift at the bookstore, and tutoring kids when I can." Richard flipped open a folder. Inside were grainy black and white photos of an old worn-down studio. "I looked into you. Freedom Steps. You founded it?" "With my sister," Diana said, straightening her back for the first time. "It's a dance program for children with disabilities." Richard gave a slight nod. But in his eyes, something had begun to shift. Richard paced slowly around the conference table, his fingertips brushing the edge of a chair. as if searching for something the file in front of him couldn't reveal. "Do you know why I asked you here?" Diana remained silent. He continued, "I have the best specialists, physical therapists, psychologists, neurologists, all of them paid handsomely. But none of them made him smile. None of them made him stand up." He paused, his voice softening. "Except you." Silence hung in the room. Then he looked directly at her. "I want to hire you as Lucas's therapeutic companion, full-time. I'll pay you 5 times what you're currently earning." Diana blinked. For the first time during the meeting, she leaned back slightly. "5 times?" she repeated, as if testing whether saying it aloud might change something in his tone. Richard nodded, firm and certain. And then she stood. "No," Diana said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably clear. Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly. He wasn't used to that word. Diana continued, "I don't work for people who only see color and class before they see competence. And I especially don't work for someone who thinks emotional pain can be solved with money." In a space of polished glass and marble, Diana's refusal landed soft, but hit like a hammer. Richard stood still, as if he couldn't quite believe he'd just been turned down. "You're walking away from a chance to solve all your financial problems out of pride?" he asked, his voice dropping. Diana lowered her gaze, as if weighing something. Then she looked up, eyes steady. "Not pride, dignity," she replied. "And because your son deserves more than someone paid to pretend they care." She reached into her bag, pulled out a worn business card, and placed it on the polished wooden desk. "Freedom Steps, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. First session's free, if you want to bring Lucas." Richard stared at the card like it was something foreign. Diana turned, hand on the door handle, then paused. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, without turning back. "Lucas doesn't need another instructor. He needs space." Out in the hallway to find his own way. Winters was still standing there. As Diana passed, she whispered in disbelief, "You just turned down Richard Montgomery?" Diana smiled, without breaking stride. Better to be called crazy than to be owned. Wednesday, 3:58 p.m. Freedom Steps sat tucked between rows of aging warehouses in the outskirts of the Bronx. The paint peeled from the walls. The sign, faded from years of rain and sun, barely clung to its letters. No one would imagine a place like this having anything to do with a name like Richard Montgomery. A Bentley pulled up to the curb. Inside the lobby, Zoe, Diana's sister, gently pulled back the curtain. "There's a Bentley outside," she whispered, "and you're not going to believe who's in it." Lucas sat in the back seat, eyes fixed on the window, as if weighing whether to step out. Up front, Richard hadn't moved. His hands gripped the steering wheel, like he was in a battle with himself. "He's not coming in," Zoe guessed. "Men like that don't set foot in places like this." Diana said nothing. She just kept watching, calm and steady. "Don't underestimate the power of a determined child," she said softly. And as if summoned by her words, the car door opened. Lucas stepped out first, his walk slow, uneven. A beat later, Richard followed, in a simple gray sweater and khakis, trying to look casual, but the air of privilege clung to him with every step. Zoe turned to her sister, stunned. "What did you do?" Diana smiled, half secret, half serenity. "Sis, this is just the beginning." Inside the worn-down studio of Freedom Steps, soft background music echoed through the open space. Children, with braces, wheelchairs, prosthetics, moved freely, as if no one was treating them. Richard frowned. "Looks like chaos." Diana approached, dressed in a simple t-shirt with the program's logo. "It has structure," she said gently. Just not the kind you're used to. Lucas glanced around, hesitant. I want to try, he said softly, then turned to his father. Richard gave a reluctant nod. I'll be right here. Diana guided Lucas toward the group. Richard took a seat, still visibly unsettled, when a deep voice called out from behind him. Mr. Montgomery, it's been a while. He turned. An older woman, hair neatly braided, leaning on a cane, entered the room. Zoe whispered, Doctor. Elaine Mercer, neuroscience professor. Harvard. Richard stood. I didn't expect to see you here. We run the research program, she replied, on neuroplasticity through self-directed movement. Richard's brow furrowed. I thought this was just a community dance class. And you turned down funding for this study 3 times, Dr. Mercer said with a faint smile. Diana is a co-author. He turned to Diana. You knew who I was? The moment you walked into the restaurant, she said. But I didn't stage that moment. Lucas stood up on his own. I just chose to believe in him. A long silence. The twist was complete, and the board they were playing on no longer belonged to Richard. The studio doors opened. A group of reporters entered, camera shutters clicking in rapid bursts. Richard turned sharply, tense. What is this? Zoe smiled, holding out a freshly printed newspaper. New breakthrough in motor recovery. Freedom Steps releases study results. We published the findings today, Dr. Mercer said, and invited the press. Richard's voice dropped, cold as steel. You used my son for media attention? Diana didn't answer. Instead, she led him to a small side room. Along the walls hung photos of children in recovery, each one with a handwritten note beneath it. Milestones reached, tiny dreams captured. In the far corner, there was one empty frame. This is the future, she whispered, a place where we'll serve 500 children every year, if we have the resources. A call rang out from the main room. Diana, it's Lucas. They rushed back. Everyone had formed a circle. In the center, Lucas was slowly unfastening one side of his brace. He wobbled, but no one stepped in. No one intervened. The boy drew a deep breath. One step, trembling, fragile, but entirely his own. Cheers erupted. Cameras flashed. Richard stood frozen, overwhelmed. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a patient in need of fixing. For the first time, he was seeing his son. The cameras were still flashing. Lucas, now seated among the circle of children, wore a smile of quiet triumph. Reporters turned toward Richard. Mr. Montgomery, any comments on today's event? Is it true the Montgomery Foundation previously rejected funding for this program 3 times? Richard looked at his son, not like a benefactor, but like a student staring at their first true teacher. A beat passed. Then he turned toward the cameras, exhaling, as if releasing something he'd held in for far too long. You want to know what's hardest? For someone like me? His voice rang deep and clear. It's admitting. Silence rippled through the room. The reporters paused. Zoe's jaw dropped. Dr. Mercer raised an eyebrow. Richard continued. On behalf of the Montgomery Foundation, I am committing to fund Freedom Steps for the next 5 years, including full financing for a new motor recovery center based on the method developed by Ms. Johnson and Dr. Mercer. The cameras exploded in a frenzy. Then Richard lifted his hand, signaling for silence. But under one condition only. His eyes found Diana, and with deliberate clarity he said, Ms. Johnson will retain full autonomy. No corporations, no consultants, no boards interfering in this program. All we will do is follow. 3 months later. The sound of excavators rumbled across an open lot, where a new recovery center was slowly rising from its first concrete foundation. No Bentleys, no bodyguards, Just Richard Montgomery, sleeves rolled up, standing beside Diana, reviewing blueprints. "You actually came to a technical meeting?" she asked, half teasing, half surprised. Richard chuckled, tapping the folder in his hands. "I've been reading up on neuroplasticity. Didn't understand a thing at first. Still don't, really. But I'm trying." In front of them, Lucas ran and played with a few other kids. No brace on his left leg anymore. Just a light support on the right, and a smile wider than the Bronx sky. "He asked to remove the extra brace last week," Richard said, his voice tinged with disbelief and pride. "I know," Diana replied. "He told me before he told you." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to her. "Diana, why did you never accept my apology?" She looked at him, not with blame, but with eyes that cut straight to the last unguarded part of him. "Because you never gave one. Transferring funds, changing policies, signing statements, those are reparations. A real apology comes with change and presence." She glanced toward Lucas. "You don't hold him anymore, but you're still here." Richard nodded, eyes stinging. "And for the first time, I understand. That's enough." Opening day. The new Freedom Steps building stood at the heart of the city. Not extravagant, but every brick laid exactly where it was needed. An open design, flooded with light. No hospital hallways, no closed therapy rooms, only music and movement, freedom. At the center of the main hall, Lucas appeared, accompanied by 3 other children, one in a wheelchair, one with a prosthetic leg, one with only one arm. The music began, not in perfect rhythm. Each child moved in their own unique way, but the heartbeat of the room moved as one. Lucas still wore a light brace on his right leg, but no one noticed it anymore. All eyes followed the confidence in every step he took. At the back of the room, Richard stood silently. No phone, no speech, just quiet observation. Diana stepped beside him. "He doesn't need you to lead anymore," she said gently, eyes still on the stage. Richard didn't answer right away. Then he turned to her, eyes glassy, but with the softest, truest smile. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me how to follow." In that moment, power no longer belonged to the one giving orders, but to the one brave enough to step back and let a child step forward. 1 year later. Freedom Steps had expanded to 3 cities. Hospitals had begun adopting its self-directed movement model for rehabilitation. Old photos, once showing children waiting for doctors to lead, were now replaced by scenes of kids guiding one another, each moving to their own rhythm. Lucas, now 11, only used a walking cane on rainy days. He had just finished delivering his first keynote speech at the National Children with Disabilities Conference. No script, no teleprompter, just one closing line that brought the entire auditorium to its feet. "I don't need a superhero. I just need someone patient enough to walk beside me." Diana, seated in the front row, didn't cry. She simply held tightly to her medal, the National Innovation Award in Pediatric Rehabilitation, not awarded by a medical academy, but by the very children who had been transformed by her work. Behind her, Richard sat quietly. A reporter leaned over and asked, "Mr. Montgomery, what's the greatest lesson you've learned from this journey?" Richard looked toward the stage. Lucas was bowing. Beside him, another child was taking their very first independent steps. He answered, slowly, but with unwavering certainty. Leadership isn't about showing the way. It's about having the courage to follow someone who knows a better one. Some revolutions don't begin with grand speeches. They begin when one person takes an honest step forward and someone else has the wisdom to follow.